letting the members that are present introduce themselves. But again, thank you for coming out on a less than perfect evening so far. We may have some other citizens and one other members stepping into the table tonight, but right now we'll begin and get the meeting underway. The RDA is a 7-member commission that undertakes special projects on behalf of development needs around the city. One of the project areas that we currently have that we're working on, as you likely know, is the Riverfront project area, and we also have the Marathon site along Main Street that we're working on. So we have a 7-member commission, we have 5 members present, and we have a quorum for tonight's meeting. And because we have a couple new members who have probably not had a chance to be introduced to the public, and we are, I believe, on WSTO this evening, I'm going to have other members other than myself now introduce themselves, starting with Lucas on my far left, and we'll just go around the room then. Go ahead.
I'm Lucas Troll. I am new to the RDA. I am a commercial banker for McFarland State Bank. And I've been at the bank now for going on 11 years.
Brian Gergen. I am new to the RDA as of about a month and a half, 2 months ago. I work with for JP Cullen, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Regina Hirsch. I'm on City Council in District 3.
And I'm Denise Durancic. I am a City Council rep representing District 1.
Thank you, RDA members. One of our members is on vacation, Carol Chenoweth, and Ron Christensen may show up a little bit later, but those are our 7 members, and I'm pleased to have the honor of being in charge of this august body of citizens and council members, because I think we have a great commission to step forward and lead us on to future project activities in the riverfront area plus the Marathon site. At this point, I'm going to just briefly go over the intent of tonight's background and meeting, and then eventually I'll be letting Gary Becker do a short presentation as we finished up our opening comments. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, in brief, is to receive public comments on TID 5 boundary changes and the time extension. And TID 8 is the other hearing we're doing this evening, and that's on the proposed project plan for the recently created TID 8 project from last December when the council approved the creation of TID 8. So tonight we'll be looking at the proposed project plan for that area. Now, because TID 8 is the new area and is also the home of the Riverfront project area, we're going to start with that one first tonight. And if you have the agenda, which is in the hallway table, you're welcome to follow along as I'm describing the process and protocol tonight. And we're going to do that one first after Gary does a short presentation momentarily. And then we're doing TID 5 second. And so TID 5 will come later. We're hoping around maybe 6:45 or so, or perhaps before, it depends on our comments, that we'll undertake then the TID 5 public hearing. So public hearing for TID 8 first, TID 5 second is the order of things for tonight's agenda. And Gary's presentation, when he comes up here, will be on the TID 5 and TID 8 background, how we got here, and also some of the financial circumstances that we need to look at and consider for moving forward with TID 5's readjustment and the TID 8 project plan. So tonight is the night for citizens to speak forth and speak their concerns about these two areas and these two project potentials and activities. And so it's your comments tonight that are kind of the chief focus of the evening. And I know because of probably the weather and circumstances, we don't have a big crowd tonight, but because of the program being carried on STO, we probably have folks at home that are following along, trying to make sure they understand also what we're doing and the progress we've made since last fall on these two projects. To help citizens understand what we're doing tonight and what the direction of the RDA is, on the back table we have frequently asked questions about TID 5 and TID 8, and so that's still on the table. If you haven't grabbed a copy of what's called the FAQs, frequently asked questions, you're encouraged to do so now. And we also have a couple of copies of the project plan for TID 8 on that rear table as well in the hallway. So if you'd like to get those copies as the meeting proceeds, you're welcome to do so, and to look at them as we kind of talk in a few moments about the project areas. And the other thing I'll point out real quickly for both the home audience and those folks here, the RDA worked very closely with the city to make sure we had a lot of materials on the city website, which were then transferred to the RDA website. And so again, if you're at home or if you're here and you want to see all the things that we've done, I would encourage you to look at the city website, and it links over then to the RDA website. We have a lot of maps there. We have a new public document, kind of a conceptual plan of the riverfront project area, done very nicely in color and very, I think, well done, representing all the things that have happened since the charrette from last year. We have the project plan for TID 8. We have a discussion of the TID 5 material. So a lot of things there. If you want to get caught up fast and see what we've been doing for the last 6 months or more, that would be the place to go. So tonight, as I said, the citizens are the focus of our intent and our purpose tonight, to have citizens get a chance to talk about their interest and concerns about the RDA areas, the TID 5 and the TID 8. And to do that, we're keeping track of anyone who wishes to speak by forms in the hallway. So if you would like to talk and come up here shortly, please make sure you fill out one of those forms. And whether it be for TID 5 or TID 8, you can do both or either one. We don't care. If you have comments, we want to hear them and make sure we've done our best to take your considerations under advisement so we can move forward with these projects over the coming couple months. Like I said, if you only want to make comments on one, just fill out the one you need. And if you want to just let us know about your feelings or concerns, again, you don't even have to take a position, yes or no. Just let us know what your concerns are. So the other thing, and I'm not sure how many citizen comments we're going to be having tonight. Do we have anybody at all so far that we are aware of? Because I was going to just go over the time dimensions of tonight. Our standard protocol, both for the RDA and the city, is a maximum of 3 minutes. Looking at the audience here in front of us, we probably could extend that a little bit tonight, quite frankly, to let anyone who wishes to talk have a little bit more time. So again, we're thinking of 3 minutes, but we can go more than that if you'd like to continue the dialogue tonight. And the other thing I'll point out, even for those at home, is that if you're not here but still wish to make comments, Holly, off to my right, the city clerk, Holly Lecht, has agreed that she would be the continuity point for forwarding comments. And so if you have written comments or other things that you wish to bring to our attention, I will give you Holly's email address now. And so you can forward those comments to her after tonight's meeting, because we'll be assembling those comments into a record, a testimonial record of our public hearings for 5 and 8 tonight. And then the RDA will, over the next couple weeks, will be looking at those and assessing them. And then at our July 11th meeting, we hopefully, if there's just minor comments and maybe perhaps minor considerations, make any tweaks we have to make of the couple of remaining documents, the project plan, and the boundary change in TID 5, if there's any at all. And then hopefully we can adopt those then on July 11th. And so that's our intent, to kind of give everyone a chance to see where we're headed. It's to let these comments tonight kind of be assessed and assembled and then shared with the RDA so we can make our final decision on July 11th. So with that said, I think I covered the basics. Let me give you Holly's email address, and I don't think, Holly, you introduced yourself before, so if you want to just do it now briefly, you're welcome to let the audience hear your voice.
Sure. I'm Holly Licht. I'm the city clerk. I'm not sure can we take written testimony from people that aren't here? Do they have to be present? They don't have to be present?
We should be able
I'm, yeah. I'm looking at Attorney Jordan. Okay. Okay.
So the answer appears to be yes.
Okay.
Okay, so written comments can be sent to Holly. And Holly, do you want to give your email address then for everybody?
Sure. It's pretty long. It's H, and then my last name Licht, Licht, at ci.stoughton.wi.us. If you go to the Stoughton City website, you can also find it under the City Clerk's Department.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So again, we have an ability to let the audience plus those at home make comments if they wish through this week into maybe early next week, but then we have to cut it off because we have to assemble all those items into a testimonial record so we can then take action on them over the coming couple weeks then. So with that said, I think we're ready to march on to Gary's presentation before we open up our meeting to the official public hearing. So Gary Becker, yes, you may. Yes, you may do that. So Gary Becker has been the RDA's official consultant for several years, as I recall. And so Gary has put together a PowerPoint program that he first shared, I believe, with the City Council on July 11th to kind of introduce the City Council to the intent of TID 5 and TID 8, how they work together to put us all in a better place. So Gary, take over and walk us through it.
All right, thank you, Roger.
Yes.
Well, before we begin this, I just wanted to clarify, I think earlier, Roger, you said that the City Council has already created TID number 8.
Oh, that's true. I
And
did say that.
that's not the case.
Right.
This is a public hearing prior to the City Council's decision to
That
do
is
that.
correct.
They did approve the planning for the creation of TID number 8 back in January, or December. So, back in 2010, the City of Stoughton created Tax Increment District number 5. And the intent of that was to address blighting conditions that existed and still exist to a certain extent along the railroad corridor that goes from the river on the north side of the downtown all the way to the river on the south side of the downtown. I don't know if there's, Rodney, is there a pointer on here?
Yep.
Is that it? No.
Oh, it's the
It
vertical
is,
line
you
one.
had it, you were just
Oh.
hitting me in the face.
Oh, sorry.
No, just kidding.
Oh,
I
there it
can
is.
see it.
Okay, so we can get the technology down here. So on the north side here, all the way along the rail corridor to the river here, and it includes the bus barn on the south side of the river. So that was created as a blight elimination district. There was a finding that blighting conditions do exist in this area. And so this was set up as a 27-year blight elimination TIF district. Let's see, I'm going to go to the next slide. So the proposal is that we remove the property that comprises the riverfront redevelopment area on the south side. I'll go back to this, and that's the area in purple. Here, there it is, right in here. So we're proposing to subtract this area from TID number 5. And one of the reasons for doing that is that TID number 5 is currently in what we call a decrement situation, and that is when a TIF district is created, we're hoping that the property values increase from the time it's created. In this case, the property values have decreased. Even though we've seen some development in TID number 5, there was a revaluation of the Millfab property a couple of years ago that essentially wiped out the increment that was created by the Elvenstead project. And so TID number 8 is currently about $1.8 million to the negative. And the city has incurred about $1 million of expenses in this for this TIF district. And so one way to address that is to remove the decrement. And because the decrement was created in that purple area by the Millfab property, if we remove that, then then that decrement goes away, and the remaining TID number 5 will have a positive balance. That will have increment in it. And so that's one way of helping to improve the situation. The other way is by extending the life by 3 years, so giving us a little more time in order to recover the expenses that have been incurred. So that's the primary reason for doing the subtraction. We're also proposing to create TID number 8 around the redevelopment area, which is the purple being subtracted from TID number 5. So taking that out and creating a new TIF district that will also be a 27-year TIF. So what we're doing is, right now, we're 8 years into the life of TID number 5. By creating TID number 8, we're resetting the clock and giving ourselves a full 27 years to recover the expenses that will be incurred in this riverfront area in order to see new development occur there. So the big picture, that's the intent of the TID restructuring. So here we can see what the amended TID number 5 will look like after the action is taken. So you can see the riverfront area has been taken out, but the TIF district still extends along the rail corridor from river to river. The proposed TID number 8 is the area that is being proposed to be subtracted from TID number 5 and includes the north side of East South Street and continues to include the bus barn area to the south, as well as the area that is primarily controlled by the RDA and the city. And then Stoughton Trailers has a couple parcels over here, and then private ownership in the remaining part of the TIF. Some of the benefits of restructuring, as I mentioned a moment ago, it'll erase the TID 5 decrement. It'll provide an additional 3 years to recover expenses. It'll reset the clock for the riverfront redevelopment area to a full 27 years compared to the current 18 years that are remaining. And then we've got some of the figures there associated with some of the values. So the projected incremental value after subtraction for TID number 5 is a little under $1 million, about $891,000. That'll generate about $19,000 a year in revenue to the TIF district. There's, as I said, there's about $1 million in expenses, so the debt service is still pretty steep on that $1 million, and there's not, even after the restructure, there's not going to be quite enough revenue to pay off that debt. And so we will need some additional development in this corridor over the next 8 to 10 years in order to be able to make this pay off. So between extending the life and seeing some more development occur in TID number 5, it should be able to pay off and finish its life on a positive note. Some of the costs that we're proposing to incur for the new TID number 8 includes capital costs, and those are any kind of infrastructure or physical improvements on the site, and includes some of the remediation, the demolition, the contributions to improving the riverfront, and making other improvements that will cause or make the site ready for new development to occur. We've got property assembly costs. Obviously, there was some property that was assembled in the course of making this happen, and so those costs are included in here. Cash grants are development incentives to property owners and developers for addressing site contamination, internal roads, and the poor soils and high ground or water table on the site, which are all impediments to development. We've got some budget items for professional services over the life of the TIF, some discretionary payments that are at the discretion of the City Council of $100,000. The project plan is written up to suggest that those could be payments to help cover RDA operating expenses, administration costs over the life of the TIF, and then TIF organizational costs. Because this TIF district will play out over a period of time, we need to account for inflation. We're hoping that most of the costs that will be incurred on the front end of the TIF, and so inflation, inflation is not expected to cover much beyond the first 10 years of the TIF district, and so we're looking at about $132,000 there. And then financing costs, the city will need to borrow some of this money in order to make this happen. So there will be interest costs, and then capitalized interest, which is borrowing in the very first couple of years, borrowing a little extra money in order to cover the interest expense on the borrowing. So we're looking at a total TID expenditure of about, with all those costs, of about little over $21 million. And some of these projects or costs are shown on this map. So we've got redevelopment assistance that can be provided across the whole TIF district to property owners or developers. Demolition and remediation, general streets and utility improvements, land write-downs, Riverwalk trail improvements, river and riverbank improvements, including some funding for the proposed Whitewater Park, because there are benefits for some of the work that needs to be done for the Whitewater Park. There are benefits to this redevelopment area. The TIF is able to pay for some of those items, like riverbank improvement, for example. We're expecting the increment to come from new development that occurs. So primarily we're looking at multifamily housing units, some mixed use along 4th Street, and a limited amount of commercial, primarily in the power plant building along 4th Street and the former blacksmith shop along East South Street. The development that's shown on this concept map represents $50 to $60 million of new development for this area, but it also includes, we're hoping that the Stoughton trailer property also becomes part of this and develops as well. And that amount includes all of the area that's shown in the outline, the black outline there. And this chart just shows, I know it's hard to see, but the primary number is circled in red at the bottom right corner. It just lists all the buildings that were shown on the previous site plan and gives an estimate of the square footage and value of each of those. And this helps us arrive at some kind of idea of what we can project as far as new increment is concerned. So we've got about $47 million in increment here. On top of that, as we go through time, property values increase, and so we need to account for that in our projections. So the $50 to $60 million in total increment accounts for appreciation in property values over the 27 years of the TIF. This chart shows a summary of the proposed land uses. So with that amount of development, we're looking at the buildings taking up about 140,000 square feet of the site, which is about 20%. Surface parking would account for 15% of the total area. Street right-of-way is about 13%. The riverfront path would take up about 10%. We're proposing a central promenade through the middle of the site that would take up about 6%, and then the rest of it is open space. Kind of the space between the buildings and everything else is just a little over a third of the total area. So that area outlined in black on the previous graphic encompasses 15.7 acres, and this is the breakdown on how it's proposed to be used. This chart shows the 27-year life of the TIF district and the timing of the construction, which is in red. And we don't know when construction will occur here. We need to make an educated guess. This chart is assuming that there will be an initial flush of development once a developer is selected and they get their plans approved. And then it'll slow down after a couple of years and then be relatively steady for a period of time. So the sooner new construction happens, the better off the TIF is financially. The more the construction is spread out in time, the less or the worse of an impact it has. So the financial performance of the TIF is not as great if it takes longer for the development to occur. And with this cash flow chart puts all the numbers together, the expenses and the revenue, and it comes out as at the end of the day to be a positive balance. And there's a chart that shows it graphically. The projected expenditures are in red, and in the early part of the TIF, you can see our expenditures are going to be high, and the revenue is low, but then as development occurs and grows in value, the revenues will grow to become larger than the expenditures, which is what we want. And then we had a few frequently asked questions. These are in the back as well, but I'll run through these quickly. Why are we holding 2 public hearings tonight? Well, the TIF statutes, state TIF law requires us to have a separate hearing for the actions associated with each district. How will TID 5 pay for itself and its expenses if TID 8 is created? We went through this. TID 5 is currently unable to pay its existing debt of $1 million. The expected increment plan for the riverfront redevelopment area would need to occur in the next 6 years for TID 5 to come close to paying off by the time it expires, even with a 3-year extension. TID 5 will still need an additional $4.5 million in increment over the next 8 to 10 years, even after the restructure. What's the relationship between TID 8 and the proposed riverfront project? TID 8 is the financing tool to pay the public improvements necessary to make the site ready to develop and the extraordinary private costs of developing on contaminated, blighted land with high groundwater and poor soils. The taxes paid on the higher post-development property values is the source of revenue to cover the public expenses of making the site productive again. How much public money will have to be invested in TID 8 over the next couple of years? Approximately $15 million in capital investment will be required. With this comes an additional $5.8 million in financing costs and about $4 million in TID administrative costs. The city is expected to finance approximately $8.5 million of this. Nearly $1 million will be paid out of cash flow, and the developer will finance the rest through a pay-as-you-go agreement. And that type of agreement is the developer borrows the money to make the site improvements that will be needed, and then the TIF pays the developer back as the revenue comes in, so that does not require city borrowing. And that was the last question.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate your thorough work on the layout of the FAQs plus a summary of TID 5 and TID 8. At this point, we're ready to go into our public hearing mode. And before we do that, what I'll just point out again, if there's folks in the audience who wish to make public comments, we do have a slip-in on the back table. And in the interest of our kind of bad weather evening and all, we can be a little more flexible, but we will still have to have you fill out a slip for the public record. So do we have folks interested in making comments tonight? Just to kind of, yeah, it will, yeah. So just kind of looking at what we have here. So in order to go further, we will need to go into our official public hearing. So I'm just reminding the audience that if they do wish to make comments, you're welcome to go back to the rear table in the hallway and fill out the slip before we enter into our public hearing. So at this point, hearing no other objections, I'll take a motion to go into our first public hearing on TID 8 from our members.
So moved.
So Denise offers the motion.
Second.
And Regina seconds for the record. All those in favor of going into public hearing for TID 8, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, abstained. So we are now in official public hearing mode for TID 8. Does anybody wish to come forward to make comments on TID 8, any aspect of it that is of interest to you? And we are taking comments, as I said, so we can't engage in much dialogue or conversation, but we can and will take comments on concerns that you may have, so we can enter that into the record and consider those over the next 2 weeks then before we go to our July 11th meeting. Comments for the public hearing? Anyone? Okay. Seeing no activity, last chance. I don't want to let anybody not say something if they wish to. So we, at this point, have no public comments, and so we will then seek a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close.
Motion to close by Regina,
Second.
second by Denise, for the record. And a vote on that. So all those in favor of closing that public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are in open session again. So at this point, we will enter into our TID 5 public hearing. Gary, did you wish to,
The TID 5 hearing was posted for 6:45.
Right,
so
I saw that, I wonder-
Stand adjourned,
right,
adjourn for 15 minutes.
okay. Was that consistent with, Matt, is that, we're going to stick with that? We did say 6:45, so, okay. So at this point then, go ahead. We will offer a motion for recess.
Recess.
Okay, so
Second.
second, so all those in favor of taking a 15-minute roughly recess?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're in recess until 6:45, at which point we'll enter into TID hearing number 5, for TID 5, at 6:45.
The weather announcement, the flood, it's around here.
You'll get that back again.
We're going to go back into open session to begin our next hearing momentarily. So you can take your seats, and but if there's anyone who wishes to, again, make public hearing comments, please fill out that simple form in the hallway and just announce yourself in a moment or so. So at this point, then, we are ready to go into our hearing mode for TID 5. And so I'll entertain a motion to go into public hearing mode for TID 5.
I so move that we go, that we have a public hearing on TID 5.
So motion by Denise, second? Second by Brian? Sure, Holly's got that. All right, and our vote. All those in favor of going into session for public hearing on TID 5? Please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay. We are officially in TID 5 public hearing mode, so anyone wishing to speak on TID 5 and comments, reactions, whatever is welcome and encouraged to come forward at this time. Anyone for TID 5 public hearing comments? Okay, I'm seeing no activities so far. Last call for public hearing comments for TID 5. Seeing none, seeing no action, I will entertain a motion to close the TID 5 public hearing.
Motion to close.
Motion to close by Regina,
Second.
second by Brian. Okay. All those in favor of going back into open session and closing TID 5, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are back in open session,
I move to adjourn.
and we have a motion to adjourn by Denise,
Second.
a second by Lucas. And one more time for the record, I will introduce Holly's email address again for anyone at home who wishes to make written comments, or anyone here yet in the audience. I'll go over that again. That will be HLICHT, Holly Licht, at ci.stoughton.wi.us. So we'll be taking written comments through this Friday and maybe into early next week at the latest, that all these comments, such that they are, would have to be turned into our official public record, so then the RDA can deal with them over the next 2 weeks before our meeting on July 11th. So with that, I think we have to vote on meeting closure. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of closing the meeting? Adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are closed. Thank you very much.